Hi. Hey, everyone.
Oh, good. Okay, so let me get our volume turned up. Sorry, I didn't want it to blind everybody. So everybody, this is Rachel Yoder. It's hard to see everybody. So we've got a big table over there in the back. I have told everybody that I will block them with my face. So just so you know, they are very excited to see you, but don't particularly want to be immortalized on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining us for a second night in a row. Like, you truly are going down in history as like one of the best guests ever for doing this. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay. Oh, that might be. How is that volume for everybody? Too loud. Okay. Let's get this. Sorry. Just okay. Can you say a test 1, 2, 3?
Sure. Testing 1, 2, 3. Come in hot off of a snow day, solo with my child all day.
Oh my God. Well, that will launch us right into the discussion.
Yeah, I don't know how coherent I'm going to be, so.
Okay, thanks. That's fair. That's totally fair. So I got. Excuse me. Can I get the tables in the back to shush? Thank you. I will put on my mommy pants for this. Okay, so Rachel, as I emailed with you about this book was like, I had every intention of going over Julia's questions and being like, I'm going to add something super thoughtful to this. And after finishing your book, I was like, I just want to say, yeah, that. So I don't actually have like anything super succinct to add. So I am going to go through Julia's questions pretty much. Hopefully we have some we can have some conversations to keep you on your toes. So we don't have too much of a duplicative night that you had last night. So again, we really appreciate you being here for this. Tell us, we know this book is kind of autobiographical. So can you talk a little bit about that? And how did you keep the line between fiction and nonfiction steady?
Yeah, it is. It does come out of an autobiographical urge. So I don't know if any of you had the experience of going into motherhood and it was sort of like the baby was a bomb that got dropped in your lives and kind of exploded your identity apart. And I really loved early motherhood, but I also really got lost in it. Like I feel like I really lost touch with the things that I felt had like made me. And one of those things was writing. So once I had my son, I stopped writing for 2 years. And this book is what came out of those 2 years of silence and mulling and thinking about the decisions I made that didn't really feel like decisions, but more felt like kind of choices I had been forced into based on the way that society was set up and gender roles in these institutions that I felt I was sort of trapped inside of. So this book was really me it was very kind of like a very personal project when it started because it was me attempting to find myself again, to get back to myself and to sort of piece myself back together because that's, the way that I make sense of the world. And the way I make sense of myself is through writing. And so returning to that through this project was really important. And then of course, I felt so alone in early motherhood and like no one else could possibly, know what it was like. I was just a freak that I was so isolated and didn't have any friends and, felt like I wasn't doing it right. And of course, that's the lie that we tell ourselves because this really personal experience I was having turned out to be something that so many people who could relate to, which was a really surprising aspect of the project too when it was done. And I also Oh, there you are. Okay, you disappeared. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just in a room by myself, like talking to myself.
No, sorry. That's to make good on my promise that I will not put our diners front and center. It gives
Okay,
them the
okay.
I'm still here, and hopefully you can still see us on the camera on the thumbnail. But yes, sorry. So you were gonna say?
Yeah, no, that I was done talking, but I was just like, is anyone going to come back? I hope I just, yeah.
Yes. No, I'm
Okay, good.
here. I'm here. We are. I try to stay muted and keep the camera away, also because we are having dinner, so there are dinner sounds, and which isn't like
Gotcha.
super. That's kind of distracting while you're trying to talk about your book. So try to be conscious of that. Yes. That those early. It's just like it's. The best way to put it is like a mind fuck. I think is really what early motherhood is like. I remember so clearly the day I fell in love with my son, and he was 3 months old. Like it took a long time for me to actually fall in love with him. Like did he came out of me and I was like, I feel like primal urge to protect you, and I will make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. But like you're a blob. You're a blob and I love you, but like I'm not like it takes a while and that's something I felt so primally that your narrator like we get to her after she's already had presumably had this experience, but there's like she's just so honest about the emotional troubles that can have like or not troubles but just like it's complicated like all of a sudden it's kind of like are you a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan?
I'm not, but go. Say it.
It's kind of like when Dawn was born when Dawn that's my best approximation of having a child. It's like all of a sudden this fully formed human is in your life and they have their own agency, they have their own right to be there, they have their own everything, and they belong to you, and you have to figure out how you belong to them. And it's just it's a lot. It's a lot. Um, okay, so one of the things in the book that is a big theme is anger. One thing that we have a lot of new parents here in the room as well. So that was a fun conversation throughout. And one of the things that we connected on early in the conversation was early in the book, her first kind of experience or description of her rage is in the nighttime, hence Nightbitch, clearly. But that, she talks about it so casually and just like, oh, like when you wake up in the middle of the night, your child is screaming and you just are filled with rage. And then you take care of your baby and then it's fine. And then the next morning you're like, oh, that was interesting. Okay, moving on. So just if you could talk a little bit about the anger in the book and just kind of how she's dealing with it, how you navigated that within the book, and just any commentary on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the book started because it was my own anger in motherhood was the most kind of perplexing and disturbing thing for me, and I didn't quite know what to do with it, and it felt really taboo to talk about. And so I just said, I'm going to explore this in this book, which I never have to show anyone if it doesn't feel safe or it feels like too scary or too crazy. But I was really looking for a mother who looked like me. I was reading books and I was trying to find someone who I could relate with. And I read a lot of great motherhood books, but they were very composed and pretty intellectual. And even if there was rage in them, it was all very processed. And I wanted to give myself a night bitch the permission to be, like you said, to be completely honest. Um, because, you know, I guess as a young mother myself, I didn't know where to find the completely honest space with other moms. Like, where was that? Because it did seem like I didn't want to be the weird mom. I didn't want to be judged. Um, and so this book really became the place where I kind of was just figuring out all this stuff and being really honest. And letting Nightbitch have a really honest experience, like letting her be as intense as she needed to be, and just following that, and not really knowing where it was going. I was not like, oh, I know how this Where Mom book is going to end. I was like, this is crazy. I guess she's eating raw meat now. I guess I'll keep writing. And so every day I would sit down and I would just let her lead me deeper into the book.
As you say that, there's like a version of this book that probably could have turned into Santa Clarita Diet with Drew Barrymore, which I love Drew Barrymore, but I'm so glad that's not what this book did, because it's just, you're right. It is. I bought so many fucking books after having a child and right before having a child, to try and help preempt making sense of myself. Like, I was talking to my psychiatrist, like, we have a game plan because we're gonna avoid postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and we're gonna catch it if it happens. And I was like, I can intellectually master this, and I didn't. Looking back, like, I definitely did have some level of postpartum anxiety in particular. But it one of the common things I think that, because we're meeting Nightbitch 2 years out, and so we've heard some questions like, was this postpartum psychosis that's just like kind of like drawn itself out and crested at 2 years, but why didn't she get help or whatever? It feels like it's impossible to know that you need help in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And how I describe this book to people many times, it's so much more fun to just be like, yeah, she's just turning into a wolf. She's just turning into a wolf. Because that's what motherhood can fucking do to you. You just you turn into an animal. And you need to. But one of the things that I really loved about this is that she had such a disjointed sense of self at the beginning. And then as she kind of like embraces this lupine sense of self, she's able to join what she feels were disjointed parts of herself. So I just thought that was really well done and really beautiful. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. There's so much in there. Now, what do I want to say? I mean, yeah, the whole topic of mental health has come up, with other readers, and that just never even crossed my mind that this was like a mental health book, because that just wasn't the paradigm I was interested in like approaching this in. I wanted it to be something that was more kind of mysterious and unknowable, because motherhood felt very mysterious and sort of ineffable to me. And there was also something that just felt really, and I couldn't explain to you why, but felt really like physically, viscerally correct about her turning into a dog. And I didn't know what it was. And we talked about this a little bit last night. I think ultimately what this book and what I was trying to kind of write about was female desire. And in all its forms, like female hunger, female ambition, female desire, female, just like what we want out of life, just our basic desires and wants. And it's really about this woman who is so trapped inside herself at the beginning that she can't even articulate to her husband what it is she needs or wants. And she's just stuck in this wordless rage. And so it's about taking that rage and really her getting in touch with her desire by going into her physical self, right? And I think her child is also, he's kind of the impetus for this, because he was like her first desire. Like her body wanted a child, right? And that's so powerful. For me, I was so in touch with that. When I hit 30, all I saw that there were like the world was suddenly populated with babies. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an ant. Like this is a real thing. Like biology is a real thing. And so ultimately, I think this is really about the power of female desire, the danger of female desire to the patriarchy, the freedom that female desire, when we embrace it, what it can bring us. And I think, yeah, that's why I went with that dog instead of sort of making it a more realistic story and, making it a mental health crisis.
I loved it. And I think but it's important that people did have that takeaway because it is, there's so much unspoken stigma around all of it. Anyways, I did have another thought that isn't on Julia's sheet, but I do want to, or maybe it is. Hold on. Let me refresh myself. I don't think so. You mentioned different references that you brought up, and I thought it was really interesting that like we open the book and Nightbitch, or well at that point just the mother is she's trying to figure out what is going on with the hair on her neck, and casually decides to reread the yellow wallpaper. Just, because that's what everyone does when they want to read something, is reread the yellow wallpaper, and that motif obviously comes back up and through. So just if there is anything kind of more that you wanted to say about the yellow wallpaper or your personal love for it, I think we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I first read The Yellow Wallpaper in college in a feminist literature class, and I obviously loved it. It was so spooky and gothic. And I'm sure I wrote an A student critical analysis of it, and brilliantly defining whatever, blah blah blah. But it wasn't until it's just interesting how a text can evolve as you evolve, right? And I found myself going into this book being like, oh, you thought you knew what the yellow wallpaper was about, but now you really know what it's about. And it just felt like all of the tensions that were brewing in that story, like that was the launching pad for Nightbitch. Also, it was like it's the same tension, even though I don't know when she wrote it. She wrote it in the early 1900s, at late 1800s. I mean, we're still kind of there, like I felt like, what, I'm still here. I'm still with her. I'm still with this gal in the yellow wallpaper room, ripping it off. And so I kind of just wanted to like reach back and touch that. And then, as we move through the book, she also kind of Nightbitch reaches back and touches her mother, and kind of has some insight into her mother and who her mother is too. So that was a really nice surprise of writing the book, was that it was kind of reaching back and touching the women who went before and the writers who went before in a way that I hadn't expected. And creating this sort of lineage of understanding and togetherness.
Thank you. So I have, let's see, what time is it right now? So it's 7:51. We actually have covered a lot of the questions that our audience has asked of us. So I'm gonna touch on a few more and then just check that we haven't missed any audience questions that I want to ask. So the next question that Julia has, which I'm gonna ask, but I want to ask the next question first, but I will ask it. So that choosing your own happiness. So if you have any thoughts on how we can walk the line between choosing and creating our own happiness in a patriarchal system and pushing against the system. Julia said you said something about that in an interview, so we're feeding your own words to you and asking you to I hope you're prepared to do that.
Gosh, yeah, that's the question, right? Is how to negotiate your own happiness when you feel like you're still working within the confines of a system that you didn't create and wasn't made to benefit you, that doesn't value mothers, doesn't value the work we do, doesn't value child rearing, doesn't, hold it up and legislate it as important. So yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for me is really working with this idea that I don't have to be happy with what I've been given and that I deserve to have what I want, which just seemed like a really radical idea for me as a woman and mother and wife, right? That I get to determine the terms of my own happiness, and it doesn't have to look like anything that I see on Instagram or have seen elsewhere, right? Um, and I found some really great tools since I wrote this book because I have been having these conversations. There's a great book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, and it's all about the division of domestic labor and how to have that conversation with your partner. I don't know about you, but at a certain point in my household, it became kind of impossible to even broach that conversation for a number of reasons. And so her system sort of gamifies it and makes it a little bit lighter, and is a way into that conversation, which I think is really helpful for a lot of people. There's also a great book by Angela Garbus called Essential Labor, which talks about, again, the division of labor and domestic work. And yeah, so I mean, I don't have any answers. When I wrote this book, I certainly didn't have any answers. I was looking for them along with everyone else. I was just kind of trying to get down an experience that hopefully, would resonate with people. Oh, I can't hear you.
It certainly did.
Okay.
It did resonate very well. So I'm gonna actually cut it out a little bit. So any input on the upcoming film?
I'm excited. What's it going to be? Who knows? I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Are you involved in the script at all?
I was not. No, I did read it before they started shooting, and I loved it. And it was amazing to see how another woman had taken the book and then put her own life into it. Also, like she'd taken it, adapted it into this new thing that was, you could see how it was inspired by the book, but then it's also it's her project now. And that is just the best possible outcome, I think, of this book, that it's inspiring other women artists to make their own art. It's kind of the biggest honor possible. So we did get to go out as a family to the set for a few days, and which was completely surreal and really fun, and just like the chillest, coolest set ever with the kindest people. So it's been a pretty amazing experience, and I never thought it never crossed my mind that a Where Mom book would get made into a movie. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
I do have to, so this is gonna seem so reductive, but since you keep talking about it as a Where Mom book, like she is turning into a wolf, right? Like it's real.
I mean, okay. I did. Okay, so my goal was to write it so that you could read it either way, right? So I think there is plausibly you could read it that she did not actually turn into a wolf or a dog and just was having a real weird couple of months, or you can read it that she did. So hopefully that worked.
I personally felt like it worked. There were some like very very hard lines, so I appreciate your answer. Okay, so when are you working on anything new? And if so, can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, I'm working on a collection of linked short stories that I've kind of been working on for 20 years, but there's new stuff in there too. And it is also kind of comes out of an autobiographical urge. And then also developing a little movie project, which who knows what'll come of it. But I guess I never thought I was a horror writer, but I guess I guess I'm a horror adjacent, at least for films. And so I'm learning about that, and it's really fun.
I think there some of the words that people have used to describe Nightbitch would be body horror. So I'd say yeah, like you're adjacent for sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, and then finally, what are were there any books that you read while writing Nightbitch that you think people would find insight from, or just this is probably the easier question, just some books you like right now that you think people should read?
Yeah, well, one book that was that really set me free to write Nightbitch was a book called Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado.
That was one of our book club books, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that book. I loved how it was, you know, it got to go and do whatever it wanted in whatever genre. And it was also really feminist and queer and playful, and it just gave me permission to sort of write the book however I wanted to write it. So I owe Carmen a lot. That book was great. I mean, I read Rachel Cusk's A Life's Work, her memoir about motherhood. As I was writing this, I read Department of Speculation by Jenny Offal, where she talks about the art monster, which is the seed, I think, of this book, the unconscious seed that started it. In terms of more recent books, I've never had a favorite book, and I recently read a book that has become my favorite book. I can say I have one, and it's called Pure Color by Sheila Heti, and it's I've never read a novel like it. It's sort of a fairy tale. It's sort of philosophical. It does things that I've never seen a novel do, and it just absolutely blew my mind. And it was beautiful, and I cried at the end. So I highly recommend it.
That is a terrific list. Thank you so much. I think we hit all the major points. So thank you so much for joining us. This was remarkable. If you are ever in Charleston or your next book, we will happily have you back. It's just been one of the best discussions we've had in a long time. So thank you so much for this book. It was very fun.
Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much for reading it. And I love Charleston. And if I want to write another book, I'll totally come there. And just thank you so much for having me. And I wish I could have heard all your conversations tonight. I'm glad you're all out child-free, having fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Give it up for Rachel, everybody. Have a great evening.
Okay, I'll see you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, let me stop the screen.